No one had any answers. What do we do now? Dr. Michael screamed as he shoved a syringe into Leo Ridgewell's chest, but the child's skin was still cold, his lips blue. The world's greatest doctors, the ones flown in from every corner of the globe, were helpless. The Ridgewell's baby was dying, and no one could say why. No one except Angela Robinson, the maid. She saw the plant, the one nobody was paying attention to, and she knew it was killing him. Angela Robinson, a 26-year-old maid at the Ridgewell estate, watches from just outside the nursery. She is invisible in the world of the Ridgewells, but she knows something the doctors don't. She watches in silence as the chaos unfolds inside the nursery, her hands shaking as she holds a rag. The doctors race to save the baby, but her mind is elsewhere, focusing on a single plant sitting innocently on the windowsill. The plant has been there for days, but Angela recognizes it for what it truly is, digitalis, also known as a devil's trumpet. Her grandmother, a healer in New York's poorest neighborhoods, taught her the dangers of this plant long ago. Now, it's in the nursery, and little Leo Ridgewell is dying because of it. As Dr. Michaels shouts orders and the Ridgewells look on, helpless and frantic, Angela's heart races. She knows she's the only one who can save the baby, but no one will listen to a maid. No one will believe her. But will she stay silent and watch the baby die? Or will she risk everything and expose the truth no one else can see? Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends, and to everyone watching for the very first time. You are truly welcome here. I'm so happy to have you with us today. I've missed you all so much. It's been a tough ride with some technical issues, but by God's grace, everything is coming back together. Thank you to my returning family for standing by me, and to our new viewers, thank you for choosing to spend your time here. Your presence means more than you know. Before we begin, I want to say a short prayer over everyone watching, especially the women. To the women, may God strengthen you, comfort you, and fill your hearts with peace and favor. To the men, may God guide you, bless your efforts, and grant you wisdom in all that you do. And may God's protection rest upon every single one of you. Amen. If you're new here, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button and join this growing family. And for everyone watching, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. My USA and UK family, I see you. Please make sure you watch till the very end, because tomorrow I'll be dropping another powerful story you wouldn't want to miss. Now, let's get into today's story. Angela's knowledge, passed down from her grandmother, could save the baby, but at what cost? In a world where she is invisible to the Ridgewells, Angela must decide whether to step forward or stay hidden in the shadows. Her decision could change everything, but she knows the stakes are higher than just a job. The clock is ticking. Let's go back and see how Angela came to be the only one who could see the truth, when no one else even knew to look. Angela had always known that the world didn't see her. Not really. She learned early that if she kept her head down, if she stayed out of sight, no one would even know she was there. That was the key to surviving in the Ridgewell house. The Ridgewells were a world unto themselves, a shining example of everything money and privilege could build. And Angela, she was the maid, the one who cleaned the bathrooms, washed the floors, and made the family's bed while they sipped wine and discussed their next big business deal. She was invisible, and that's exactly how she'd learned to survive. But survival wasn't all she had learned. Angela had been raised in a small brownstone in Harlem, a place where people's lives were stitched together with a different kind of thread. Her grandmother, who everyone called Mama Rose, was a healer, a woman who had lived through the worst of times and still managed to find light in the darkest corners of life. Mama Rose didn't have fancy degrees or certificates hanging on the wall. She had something better, knowledge passed down through generations, whispered from one woman to the next like a sacred secret. Angela was the one Mama Rose chose to teach. Baby girl, you see things others miss. Mama Rose had said, her voice thick with wisdom and life's hard lessons. That's because you've got the eyes of someone who's had to look past the obvious. You've got to learn to see more than just what's in front of you. The world is a way of hiding its truths behind the prettiest things. Angela didn't always understand what her grandmother meant by that. As a child, she was more interested in playing jump rope with the other kids or running through the alleys with her friends. But Mama Rose kept teaching. Herbs, plants, roots, each one with its own power, some to heal, others to hurt. She taught Angela how to recognize the deadly plants that grew in the streets, the ones that could bring a fever down in an instant or make a man's heart stop without a single warning. There's power in what you know, child, Mama Rose would say, staring off into the distance. People can have all the money in the world, but they won't be able to buy the truth when it comes for them. This knowledge will protect you when nothing else can. At the time, Angela thought it was just a game, a way for her grandmother to pass the time. But as she grew older, she realized that Mama Rose was teaching her more than just how to brew a pot of tea or create a poultice for a cold. She was teaching her how to survive in a world that didn't want to see people like them, people from the neighborhoods, people with histories too rough for polite company. Angela had seen the world through a different lens by the time she was 14. She could tell the difference between the leaves of a plant that could cure a rash and the ones that would burn you if you touched them. She knew the difference between a root that could settle a stomach and one that would shut a man's heart down, quiet and swift. But that was all knowledge Mama Rose had passed down, knowledge that Angela had carried with her when she left Harlem for a job at Pacific Heights, cleaning the grand estate of the Ridgewell family. It was meant to be a temporary gig, just a way to get by. But life had a funny way of sticking people where they didn't belong. She had stayed in the shadows, the background. She was good at that. No one bothered her, and she kept the mansion clean in exchange for food, rent, and a place to sleep. Angela never imagined she would be anything more than a servant. She certainly didn't think she'd end up being the only person who could save the Ridgewell's precious son, Leo. The first time she saw the plant, Angela didn't think much of it. It was just another gift, like the others that the Ridgewells received. A gorgeous flower, probably from one of the family's trips abroad. But then she saw the oily residue on the gardener's gloves. She remembered the warning from her grandmother. That plant's poison. Girl. Pretty as a picture, but poison all the same. That was when the knot in her stomach began to tighten. The plant wasn't just a gift. It was a thing that was killing the baby. Angela wasn't stupid. She'd seen enough to know what was happening. She knew the Ridgewells didn't see her. To them, she was just another fixture in the background, a part of the house like the furniture or the maid's uniform she wore. But she also knew she couldn't stay quiet this time. She had a responsibility, not just to herself, but to Leo Ridgewell. She couldn't let him die because no one was willing to look past the surface. She was the only one who could see the truth. But what would it cost her? Angela swallowed hard as she stood there outside the nursery, her mind racing. The Ridgewells had never given her a second glance. They never saw the things she could do, the things her grandmother had taught her, the knowledge that could save a life. What would it mean for her to step forward now? To risk everything? To break the silence and speak up in a room full of doctors, each one with more letters after their names than she could count? Would they listen to her? Or would she be laughed out of the room, just another invisible maid with nothing to offer? Her fingers trembled as she clutched the rag in her hands. The seconds were ticking away. Leo was dying, and the truth was staring her in the face. Angela knew what the doctors didn't. She knew what the Ridgewells couldn't see. But she was scared, not just of the consequences of speaking up, but of what it would mean to finally step out of the shadows. Would it change her life? Or would it destroy everything she had fought so hard to keep? Angela has the power to save him, but no one knows her name. This story is about the forgotten ones who can change everything. If you've ever felt invisible, Angela's about to do what no one thought possible. Angela's heartbeat quickened. She knew what she had to do. But in a world where the invisible stayed unseen, was she ready to change everything? The clock was ticking, and the answers were in her hands. The Ridgewell family lived in a world that could make anything possible. Pacific Heights, their sprawling estate, sat atop a hill overlooking the city, vast, pristine, and as untouchable as the empire Nathaniel Ridgewell had built. The mansion gleamed in the golden light of late afternoon, with marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and walls lined with priceless art. But beneath the surface, it was a kingdom built on secrets, control, and power, one where no one had to ask for anything. They simply took it. Nathaniel Ridgewell had earned his billions in tech, designing the software that ran half the world's most influential companies. He was the kind of man who closed business deals over dinner, where he and his wife, Lisa, would sip imported wine and talk of mergers and acquisitions. For them, every problem had a price, every desire a solution. Lisa Ridgewell was a picture of grace and elegance, a woman who had turned being married to a billionaire into an art form. Her face graced the covers of society magazines, and her wardrobe could feed an entire family for a year. She carried herself like royalty, and in this world of wealth and status, she was treated as such. A perfect life. Or so it seemed. But beneath the perfect veneer, something was missing. They had everything, except for the one thing that mattered now. Their son, Leo Ridgewell, their only child, the heir to it all. Leo was only 18 months old, but his survival had already become a matter of life or death for the Ridgewells. The wealth that surrounded them was nothing compared to the fear they felt in this moment. Leo's future meant everything to Nathaniel, and nothing else seemed to matter. To him, Leo wasn't just a child. He was the future, the name, the empire. Without Leo, the legacy he had worked his entire life to build would crumble. As the doctors continued to run tests on Leo, trying to figure out what was happening to him, the tension in the mansion was palpable. Nathaniel paced the halls, making calls to specialists from around the world, demanding answers. Meanwhile, Lisa sat in the nursery, her perfectly manicured hands gripping the armrest of her chair, her face pale, her eyes red from crying. They had everything, except for control. Angela, standing in the wings, watched the Ridgewells from the outside. She knew that world, knew how the Ridgewells lived in their bubble of privilege, their power, their money. But she also knew she was nothing in that world. Just a maid, a shadow in their mansion. She did what she was told, and she stayed out of sight. But as she watched them, a part of her felt anger stir in her chest. They had everything, and still, they couldn't save their own child. In a world where money buys everything but life, how far would you go to save a child who may never even know your name? Stick with us, because Angela is about to risk it all. The contrast between the Ridgewells and Angela could not have been starker. They lived in a world where everything was handed to them, while Angela had to fight for every little bit of dignity. She had no choice but to stay invisible in a world where the rich never noticed people like her. But right now, as Leo's life hung in the balance, Angela had the power to change everything. And she knew that power could either break her or make her stronger than ever before. This was a moment, but what would it cost her? The Ridgewell nursery had transformed into a medical war zone. Doctors rushed in and out, barking orders that collided with the beeping of machines that grew louder by the second. A dozen specialists hovered over little Leo Ridgewell, trying to stabilize his tiny body. Tubes, wires, and monitors surrounded him. Yet nothing worked. The once peaceful nursery, decorated with pastel colors and stuffed animals, now felt cold and clinical. Blood pressures dropping again. Dr. Michael shouted, his voice thick with panic. He adjusted the floor, pushing more fluids into the baby's frail body. This isn't right. We're missing something. Dr. Patel, the neurologist, stepped back from Leo's crib, wiping his forehead with the back of his gloved hand. He exchanged a look with Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the pediatric expert from Tokyo. Neither had spoken for a moment, but the air in the room felt suffocating with the weight of their unspoken thoughts. They had no answers, no more tests, no more theories. The child was still slipping away. Maybe it's a genetic disorder, Dr. Tanaka suggested, but her voice lacked the certainty it once had. We ran the tests, Dr. Michaels countered, frustration mounting in his voice. Everything came back clean. Another pulse of panic spread through the room. The doctors were silent for a beat, each one trying to process the crushing weight of failure. There was nothing left to do. This child, the heir to a multi-billion-dollar empire, was dying, and no one had the answers. Nathaniel Ridgewell, who had been pacing the room since the doctors arrived, stopped in his tracks. His face was pale, his eyes wild with fear. He had everything, his fortune, his businesses, his power, but in this moment, none of it mattered. Leo's life was slipping away, and he couldn't stop it. Lisa Ridgewell, standing by the window, pressed her palm to her mouth, stifling a sob. The sound of her despair cut through the sterile silence, a stark contrast to the controlled world of wealth they'd built. She was shaking, barely holding herself together. The reality of the situation was too much to bear. Her son, her baby, was slipping through her fingers. The room was a cacophony of whispers and hurried movements. But for Angela, it felt like the world had gone silent. She was standing outside the door, clutching a towel in her hands, watching from the shadows. She wasn't supposed to be here. No one was supposed to know she could see what they couldn't. But there it was, clear as day. The plant. That damn plant. Her heart hammered in her chest, and her stomach twisted in knots. She knew. She had known from the moment the doctors started, from the moment Leo's condition had worsened. It wasn't an infection. It wasn't genetic. It was that plant. The one sitting in the nursery's windowsill. Too beautiful, too innocent-looking to raise suspicion. Angela closed her eyes, imagining her grandmother's voice, as clear as it had been when she was a child. That's a devil's trumpet. Girl. Beautiful to the eye, but deadly to the heart. But the doctors didn't see it. They never would. And the Ridgewells, they would never listen to someone like her, a maid, a nobody. But she had to say something. If she didn't, Leo would die. Imagine standing in that room, knowing you have the answer, but no one will listen. Angela's about to step out of the shadows in a way that will change her life forever. If you feel that pulse in your chest, don't look away. Her palms were sweaty as she stepped forward, closer to the chaos unfolding before her. The sound of her own breath seemed deafening in the thick, desperate silence. Angela's eyes scanned the room, then locked on plant. She could see it so clearly. She wasn't wrong. It was poisoning the baby, and she knew how to stop it. She couldn't stay hidden any longer. It was time to step forward. But would they listen? The room was chaos, a blur of movement and fear. The Ridgewell nursery had never felt so cold, so sterile. The doctors moved in a synchronized frenzy, their hands flying over monitors, adjusting tubes and machines, trying everything they could think of to stabilize little Leo. But nothing worked. Leo's tiny chest barely rose, and his skin had turned a sickly shade of pale blue. Time was running out, and they were out of answers. Angela stood just outside the door, her back pressed against the cold marble of the hallway. The weight of the room's desperation slammed into her chest. She couldn't breathe. She wanted to step forward, to speak, but her body wouldn't move. Her legs felt like lead, her throat constricted with fear. She had seen the truth, the answer that no one else could see. She knew what was killing Leo, but she was just a maid. She wasn't supposed to be in this room, wasn't supposed to speak. The Ridgewell saw her as nothing more than a shadow, a person meant to stay invisible. Even these doctors, the best in the world, would dismiss her as nothing more than a servant. She could feel it in their eyes. They didn't see her. They couldn't possibly listen to her. Still, she couldn't stand there and watch the baby die. You have to speak up, Angela. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind, steady and strong, as if Mama Rose was standing beside her. The world won't see you. They'll never see you. But you've got the knowledge, and sometimes that's all you need to change the world. Angela's heart pounded in her chest. She couldn't stay hidden anymore. She couldn't be invisible. Not today. With trembling hands, she stepped forward. She didn't know how it happened. 1 second, she was frozen, and the next, her feet were moving toward the center of the room, toward the one thing that could save Leo's life. Wait! Angela's voice rang out, cutting through the noise like a knife. It was so quiet, yet so loud in the silence of the room. All eyes turned toward her, 18 pairs of eyes, filled with disbelief. Dr. Michaels was the first to react. His face twisted with confusion. What could you possibly know about this? He snapped. His tone was sharp, dismissive. The other doctors looked at each other, muttering quietly. Angela's heart raced in her chest, but she didn't back down. She couldn't. Not when she knew what was happening. Not when the life of that baby hung in the balance. It's a plant, Angela said, her voice shaking but firm. That plant on the windowsill. It's poisoning him. Digitalis. I know because my grandmother taught me about it. The doctors froze, staring at her as if she had just spoken in another language. Their skepticism was palpable. They dismissed her in the blink of an eye, as if she was just another voice in the background, irrelevant. But Angela pushed forward. It's poisoning him, slowing his heart. You need to take it out of here. Now. She knew how it sounded. She knew they would laugh at her, but she couldn't stand there anymore. Leo was slipping away, and she couldn't wait for permission. A beat of silence passed, heavy and thick with disbelief. Then, Dr. Michaels let out a bitter laugh, but his eyes were uncertain. What does a maid know about medicine? He sneered. Angela took a deep breath, her courage swelling in her chest. She wasn't backing down. Not today. What would you risk to save a life no one believes in? Her voice was calm now, steady, despite the storm raging in her chest. I'm standing at the edge, just like you are, but I know this, and I'm willing to risk everything. She stepped closer to Leo's crib, her heart pounding in her ears. This was her moment. If you're ready to see how far Angela is willing to go, hit subscribe. This is where it all changes. The tension in the room was suffocating. Angela's words had landed, and whether they believed her or not, there was no turning back now. The Ridgewell estate's grand dining room felt like a world away from a nursery. Luxurious, pristine, with walls draped in rich tapestries and towering windows overlooking the city. The floor was polished to perfection, but it might as well be made of ice, given the cold silence hanging in the air. Nathaniel Ridgewell stood at the head of the long dining table, his fists clenched by his sides, eyes wild with desperation. His empire, the vast wealth, the endless power, meant nothing now. His son, his future, was slipping through his fingers, and there wasn't a damn thing he could do about it. What do you mean? No answers. Nathaniel's voice broke through the stillness like a slap. The desperation was obvious now, raw and real. The world had always bent to his will, but right now, nothing could. Dr. Michaels, still in his medical scrubs, stood at the table, avoiding Nathaniel's gaze. He looked exhausted, defeated. We've run every test, checked everything. It's inconclusive, sir. There's nothing physically wrong with the child. We're out of options. Lisa Ridgewell, her face streaked with mascara from crying, sat at the other end of the table, her hands pressed against her forehead as if she could stop the grief from consuming her. Her eyes locked on the doctors, pleading for something, anything, that could explain why her son was dying. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Angela stood just inside the doorframe, unnoticed for a brief moment, her fingers twisting the edge of her apron. She had never seen the Ridgewells like this. The strong, untouchable figures who lived in a world where money solved everything now seemed broken, helpless. You, of all people, Nathaniel barked, his voice cracking with frustration as he turned toward the doctors. You're telling me there's nothing you can do? Angela's heart thudded painfully in her chest as she stepped forward. Her stomach churned with fear and nerves, but she couldn't turn back. She couldn't stand by and let this family, this child, slip away. But just as she moved closer, she felt the weight of their gazes on her. The doctor's eyes flicked past her, dismissing her entirely. The Ridgewells, too, looked at her as though she had interrupted something important, an invisible presence, barely worth a second thought. Lisa Ridgewell's eyes landed on her, and for a fleeting moment, there was a flicker of something, maybe hope. But it vanished in an instant, replaced by the cold indifference Angela had come to expect. What could you possibly know about this? Dr. Michaels sneered, shaking his head as if she had no right to be there. Angela's heart cracked at the dismissal. All her life, she had been invisible to the world. But this moment, this was different. She wasn't just invisible to them. She was a person who knew the truth. The plant was poisoning Leo. She could see it, plain as day. But in a world where wealth and education were the only things that mattered, her voice, her knowledge, meant nothing. Her eyes flicked to Nathaniel and Lisa, but their expressions were distant. She could almost hear their thoughts. She's just a maid. But Angela held firm. She couldn't back down. Not now. With all the dignity she could muster, she stepped into the space between them. I know what's happening to him. The plant, on the windowsill in his nursery. It's poisoning him. A cold silence fell over the room, and she could feel the tension tighten like a noose. She had spoken her truth, but it felt like no one was listening. Nathaniel Ridgewell's jaw clenched, and his eyes darted to the doctors, silently demanding something more from them. The disbelief in his gaze matched the disbelief in Lisa's, as if the idea of being saved by someone like Angela was beyond comprehension. Angela swallowed hard, but she refused to look away. She was still standing, still fighting, even if they would never believe her. She might have no name in their world, but this time she wouldn't be silenced. The gulf between their worlds was vast, but Angela had a choice. to remain hidden in the shadows or to fight for the life of the child, despite the odds, despite the class divide that sought to keep her in her place. This moment would change everything. The question was, would she have the strength to see it through? The nursery, once a place of soft lullabies and quiet moments, now felt like a battleground. The rhythmic beeping of monitors was louder than ever, and the frantic movement of doctors only intensified the chaos in the air. But amid the turmoil, there was something different this time. A new, heavy urgency. Angela stood at the far corner of the room, barely breathing as she watched Dr. Michael stare at the monitors, frustration etched deep into his features. He shook his head, muttering under his breath, as though trying to convince himself that the situation wasn't as hopeless as it felt. Leo's chest barely moved. His small body lay there, still, like the world's greatest wealth had no power over fate. There was no more denial now. The doctors were out of answers. But Angela knew. She felt the cold burn of a judgment as they swept past her, disregarding her completely, their gaze never lingering for more than a second. She was just a maid, nothing more than a shadow to them. But she wasn't here for them. She wasn't here for their approval. Angela kept her eyes fixed on Leo's fragile form, the plant still sitting innocently on the windowsill, its delicate flowers untouched. If they only knew. This is hopeless, Dr. Michael said, his voice hollow with defeat as he stepped back from the crib. His hands were trembling now, the facade of control slipping away. Angela's fingers tightened around the edge of the counter, her heart racing. Was she really about to do this? Just as the room seemed to sink deeper into hopelessness, a young doctor, one she hadn't seen before, stepped forward. He was tall, with a nervous air about him, his eyes darting nervously between the others. He caught sight of Angela for the first time, and for a brief moment, she thought he might speak up too. "Excuse me, Dr. Michaels," the junior doctor said, his voice softer than the others. I overheard something she said earlier, about the plant." The room went still. Dr. Michaels glanced at the young man, eyes narrowing. "What did you say?" I don't know if I believe it, but I've been thinking about it." The junior doctor's voice wavered. "She's right. We've been looking everywhere for disease, but maybe we've been looking in the wrong place. We never even considered the environment around him." The room fell silent. Angela's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected anyone to believe her. The young doctor moved closer to the windowsill, his eyes scanning the plant Angela had pointed out earlier. He reached out, carefully lifting a single leaf, inspecting it closely. "Digitalis," he whispered, almost to himself. Then, his voice rose with certainty. "This is Digitalis, foxglove. It's highly toxic. If it's been in the air, I need to recheck his blood work." A pause. An eternity. The tension in the room was suffocating as a junior doctor rushed to Leo's side, pulling up the latest results. He muttered to himself, running his fingers through the papers, before his eyes widened in disbelief. This can't be," he whispered, scanning the numbers again. He looked up, his face pale. The blood showing traces of poison, traces of Digitalis. The truth had finally emerged. The thing Angela had known from the start, the thing no one had believed, was right in front of them now. The plant had poisoned the baby. The room erupted in frantic activity as the doctors snapped into action, adjusting treatment, administering antidotes. But Angela stood frozen in place. For a moment, it felt like the weight of the world had been lifted from her shoulders. She wasn't invisible anymore. She had saved Leo, but the hardest part had just begun. The mansion was quiet now, the frantic rush of the doctors and the chaos of the nursery a distant memory. Little Leo had been stabilized, his condition slowly improving as the antidote took effect. But the celebration of his survival had quickly faded into a heavy silence, thick with the weight of what had just transpired. Angela sat alone in the kitchen, her hands still trembling as she wiped down the counter, the motion robotic. She had done it. She had saved him. But in the aftermath, all she felt was a gnawing emptiness, like the echo of something that could never be repaired. The Ridgewells had offered their gratitude. At least, Nathaniel had, in his business-like way, a few stiff words of thanks. A promise to ensure Angela's safety and her job was secure. But there was no warmth in his voice. There was no acknowledgement of the cost. Not of the risk Angela had taken, not of the boundaries she had crossed. The door creaked open, and Lisa Ridgewell stepped into the kitchen. Her face was pale, drained from hours of worry and relief. But there was something more, something unspoken that hung in the air between them. Angela didn't turn around, but she felt Lisa's presence behind her, felt the weight of her stare. I never thought I'd see the day," Lisa said softly, her voice carrying the weight of 1,000 thoughts. "That someone like you would be the one to save him." Angela's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to say something, anything to ease the tension, but the words felt heavy, trapped in her chest. She was a maid. She had never been anything more. And in this moment, it felt like she was still that invisible girl, someone who could never truly be seen, no matter what she did. Lisa stepped forward, sitting down at the kitchen table across from Angela. She didn't say anything for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Why didn't you tell me?" Lisa asked, her eyes searching Angela's face. "Why didn't you come to me? I could have helped. I could have—" Angela shook her head, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "You wouldn't have listened. You would have dismissed me, just like everyone else. I had to do it on my own. For him." Lisa's face softened, but the guilt in her eyes was impossible to ignore. "You saved my son, and I can't ignore that. But what does that mean for you, Angela? You're not like us. You don't belong in our world. I don't even know where you fit into all this." Angela felt the sting of Lisa's words. There was no malice in them, just a raw, painful truth that Lisa couldn't hide. Angela didn't belong. She had always known that. But to hear it out loud was different. To feel the weight of that reality, asterisk the gulf between them asterisk, was suffocating. "Maybe I don't fit anywhere," Angela whispered, her eyes downcast. "But I know one thing. I couldn't stand by and let him die. I couldn't live with myself if I had." The silence between them stretched, heavy and unresolved. The moment of triumph, the relief of saving Leo, had come at a personal cost Angela hadn't fully understood until now. The Ridgewells could never truly see her, not in the way she needed them to. She had done the right thing, but that didn't erase the years of invisibility, the years of being nothing more than a shadow in their world. Angela's moment of triumph didn't feel like victory. It felt like the start of something else, a journey she wasn't sure she was ready for. A reality where the rules had changed, but the price of change was still too high to measure. Angela's moment of triumph doesn't feel like victory. Her entire life has changed. But at what cost? If you've ever been underestimated, you'll understand what happens next. Stick around. Angela's fight isn't over. Angela stood up, wiping her hands on her apron, but the weight of her next steps hung in the air like a shadow. She had saved a life, but would anyone ever truly see her for who she was? Or would she always remain invisible in a world where the only thing that mattered was what you could give? The Ridgewell estate had fallen quiet. The frantic beeping of monitors, the hasty footsteps of doctors, the crushing anxiety that had filled the halls for days, gone. In its place was a strange, almost oppressive silence that hung in the air like a fog. Leo was safe now, his recovery slow but steady. The weight of what had happened, of what Angela had done, was still settling into the walls, into the very foundation of the mansion. Angela had never expected this. Never expected to be seen. Not really. But in the days after Leo's recovery, she noticed something. The Ridgewells, the people who had once walked past her like she was nothing, now looked at her differently. Nathaniel Ridgewell, for all his pride and power, offered her something he had never given anyone before: respect. He wasn't the man who gave empty words. His gratitude was deep, meaningful. He had seen Angela for who she truly was, not just a maid who cleaned the floors. "You saved him," he had said to her, his voice gruff but sincere. "We don't forget that." Lisa Ridgewell had been softer, quieter since the crisis. She no longer looked at Angela with the dismissiveness of someone who didn't understand her place. Instead, she'd offered a simple nod, a sign of acknowledgement that spoke volumes. But it wasn't just gratitude she offered. There was something else, something that Angela couldn't put her finger on, something that felt almost like guilt. But even as the Ridgewells recognized her, Angela felt the familiar ache of distance growing between them. They were grateful, yes, But they weren't changed. They would go on living in their world of privilege, their empire still intact. And she would still be the maid. But now, she wasn't just anyone. She had done something none of them could do. She had saved Leo, but in doing so, she had unlocked a door she couldn't close. The house was quieter now, almost empty, with fewer servants on duty. The Ridgewells, still grateful, had made adjustments. Angela was given a new role, a position of trust, though she could never quite shake the feeling that it was still just a way to make her feel seen, without actually changing the dynamic. She had been promoted, yes, but the weight of her position in this world, the gulf between her and the Ridgewells, remained unbridgeable. She stood in the kitchen one evening, staring out the window at the sprawling lawn beyond. The house was quiet now. Still, she was alone. The house that had once felt like a gilded cage now seemed like a place that would never truly be her own. She had done the right thing, but the truth was, it hurt. Angela's life had changed. Yes, she had saved a life that no one thought she could. But in doing so, she had left parts of herself behind, parts that could never go back to the way they were. She was no longer the invisible girl who washed dishes and made beds, but she was still the maid. And maybe that was something she would never escape. Some stories end with a happy ending, but Angela's doesn't feel like that. Her battle is still here, inside her. If this story has touched you, maybe it's because you've been there, too. Don't let her struggle be forgotten. Angela stood, one hand on the windowsill, looking out at the stars that stretched above the estate. She had fought for something bigger than herself, but now, in the quiet aftermath, she wondered, what happens next? The world outside was still there, waiting. Her fight wasn't over. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazy and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.